Let's talk about something that too many people, especially amazing, loving, loyal women, go through far too often. You gave your time, your energy, your heart. You were consistent, thoughtful, present. And in return, he treated you like an option. Let's call it what it is. He knew you were there. He knew you cared. He knew that if he picked up the phone, you'd answer, but he didn't give you the same in return. He took you for granted, not because you weren't valuable, but because he thought you'd never leave. You showed up. That's the part he never truly understood. You showed up emotionally, mentally, physically. You were all in. You didn't send half-hearted texts. You didn't see how it goes. You didn't play games. You were real. You were present. You were there. And when someone like you shows up in someone's life, it's a gift, not because you're perfect, not because you never made mistakes, but because your intentions are pure, because you genuinely care. You made the effort. You remembered things he said in passing. You looked for ways to connect, to support, to build something that mattered. Even when he didn't ask, you were giving him more than most people do on their best day. But here's where it gets painful. While you were being consistent, he was being convenient. He wasn't matching your effort. He was sporadic, in and out, sometimes hot, mostly cold, present when it suited him, distant when it didn't. You were planning dates, checking in, trying to build something meaningful. He was sending one-word replies and giving excuses about being busy, as if you're supposed to believe no one has 5 seconds to say, thinking of you. Let's be honest, that inconsistency wasn't random. It was a choice to give the bare minimum, a choice to keep you around without ever committing, a choice to enjoy the benefits of your emotional availability while staying emotionally unavailable himself. And because you cared, you tried harder. You thought, maybe if I'm just a little more patient, he'll come around. Maybe if I just explain myself better, he'll understand. But let's get something clear. People don't need to be convinced to care. If he wanted to, he would have. If he valued you, he would have shown up like you did, but he didn't. And it's not because you weren't enough. It's because he never knew what to do with someone you were consistent. And in his mind, that's meant you weren't going anywhere. He got comfortable. He got lazy. He believed that no matter what he did or didn't do, you'd still be there. That's what people do when they think they have unlimited chances, when they believe your love will outrun their apathy. And unfortunately, when someone gets used to your consistency without giving it back, they stop appreciating it. You became his emotional safety net, not because you were weak, but because you were loving, not because you had no standards, but because you were hopeful. But let me say something important. Consistency is not desperation. It's not clinginess. It's not weakness. In fact, it's rare in a world full of what are we's, late replies, mixed signals, and people who can't even commit to a weekend plan. Being consistent is powerful. It's courageous. So don't you dare feel ashamed of showing up fully. Don't let his inability to match you make you question your own worth. You weren't too much. He was too little. You weren't doing too much. You were doing what any emotionally mature adult does when they're interested in someone. They show up. And he couldn't meet you there, not because he didn't understand how, but because he wasn't ready or willing to give what you give. Some people want love without responsibility. They want affection without effort. They want you to be all in while they keep one foot out the door. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can keep trying to prove yourself to someone who doesn't even see the value in what you already offer. Or you can recognize your own worth and stop pouring into a cup with a hole in the bottom, because you deserve reciprocity, not just someone who texts back, but someone who initiates, not just someone who tolerates your presence, but someone who's excited about it, not just someone who says the right things once in a while, but someone whose actions consistently match their words. Love isn't meant to feel like anxiety. It's not supposed to be a puzzle you're constantly trying to solve. It's not supposed to feel like you're auditioning for a role someone else is barely casting. So yes, you were consistent and he wasn't. And that matters. That says everything, because in the end, relationships don't fall apart because one person gave too much. They fall apart because the other person gave too little and expected that imbalance to be sustainable. It's not your job to shrink yourself to make someone else feel comfortable. It's not your responsibility to carry the emotional weight of two people you gave with honesty, you loved with sincerity, you showed up. That's not something to regret. That's something to be proud of. Because next time, you won't waste it on someone who doesn't know what to do with it. Let's get something straight, something that might just change the way you carry yourself moving forward. When someone takes you for granted, it says far more about them than it does about you. We internalize these experiences so deeply, you start wondering what you did wrong. You replay every conversation, you pick apart your own actions, your words, your tone, thinking, was I too much, too available, not enough of something? But let's pause right there. Being taken for granted doesn't mean you lacked value. It means the other person lacked awareness. It means they weren't emotionally intelligent enough, grounded enough, or mature enough to recognize the quality of what was right in front of them. See, people don't always know how to handle something that's consistent, especially when they've been living off of chaos. When someone is used to emotional games, heart effort interactions, and people who only love them when it's convenient, they mistake real love, healthy, stable, available love, for something boring or even suspicious. So when you came along, open-hearted, reliable, sincere, they didn't know what to do with that. And instead of rising to meet you, they misread the situation. They thought your love would always be there, no matter how little they gave in return. That wasn't your failure. That was their blindness. They had gold in their hands and they were too distracted, too complacent, or too insecure to recognize it. That doesn't devalue the gold. It just reveals how little they understood what they were holding. But here's the tricky part. When you care deeply about someone who doesn't reciprocate in a meaningful way, it's easy to take their behavior personally. You start to think, if I was more interesting, more fun, more mysterious, maybe they would try harder. But here's the truth. You could have been the most magnetic, witty, loving person in the world. And if they weren't in a place to receive that, they still wouldn't have seen it, because people don't appreciate what they don't believe they need to earn. It's not that you gave too much, it's that they gave too little. And they thought that imbalance was acceptable. But your kindness, your effort, your loyalty, those weren't mistakes, they were gifts. Gifts offered in the hope of building something real. Gifts you offered because that's who you are. And if someone can't appreciate that, that is their loss. That is their immaturity. That is their story to deal with, not yours. We have to stop believing that being taken for granted is proof we're not enough. It's the opposite. And it's proof that someone else wasn't capable of rising to meet us, that they saw something beautiful and chose to act like it was replaceable, that they didn't yet understand what it means to value a person, not just enjoy them. Because value is shown through action, shown in how someone shows up, not just when things are easy, but when they require effort, intention, consistency. So if someone showed you through their behavior that they didn't value you, believe them. Believe their actions, believe the silences, believe the excuses, and stop rewriting their potential into a version of them that never actually existed. They didn't fail to see your worth because you were lacking. They failed to see your worth because they weren't ready or willing to show up for it. And that's not a reason to shrink. That's not a reason to hold back next time. That's a reason to be even more selective, because now you know what to look for. Now you know the difference between being admired and being respected, between being liked and being chosen consistently without conditions. And maybe for a while, that knowledge stings because you realize you gave your energy to someone who couldn't meet you halfway. But one day soon, that sting turns into strength. You'll stop blaming yourself. You'll stop asking why you weren't enough. And you'll start asking a better question. Why did I stay where I wasn't seen? That question is powerful because once you ask it, you begin building boundaries. You stop settling for crumbs. You stop apologizing for your standards. You recognize that your job is not to prove your worth to someone who's emotionally unavailable. Your job is to protect your energy, to preserve your peace, to give your love to someone who's not just capable of receiving it, but excited to. So the next time someone fails to show up for you, remember this. It's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of theirs, their ability, their timing. And no matter how much you wanted them to be the one, The right person will never make you feel like you have to convince them of your worth. So don't carry that rejection like a wound. Carry it like a reveal. It showed you who they really are and reminded you of who you're never going to be again. There's a moment, quiet, often private, sometimes messy, when everything changes. And it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with fireworks or some grand declaration. Sometimes it's just stillness, a pause, a breath. But it's the moment you decide, I'm done chasing someone who doesn't chase me back. You see, we think the power in a relationship lies with the person who cares less, the one who texts back late, the one who keeps us guessing, the one who seems hard to get. But that's not power. That's avoidance dressed up as mystery. That's insecurity pretending to be strength. Real power? Real strength? It happens the moment you stop waiting for someone to finally see what you've been showing them all along. To the moment you walk, not because you want to hurt them, not because you're trying to teach them a lesson, but because you finally realize, I've been handing my energy to someone who's done nothing to deserve it. And when you walk, really walk, the entire dynamic shifts. You stop reacting. You stop hoping for crumbs. You stop checking your phone like it's going to hold the apology or clarity they never gave you, because you no longer need it. See, people get used to your presence. They get used to the comfort of knowing you'll always answer, always care, always be one emotional reach away, even when they don't deserve that access. And so long as you keep showing up for someone who only shows up halfway, they never feel the urgency to change. Why would they? They have the benefit of your loyalty without the responsibility of earning it. But when you walk away, truly walk, the silence is deafening, because for the first time they have to sit in the space you used to fill. The messages stop, the support disappears, the emotional security you provided, the warmth, the understanding, it's gone, and it hits them not all at once, but slowly. When they realize your name no longer lights up their phone, when they notice you're no longer watching their stories, no longer available on demand, when someone else asks about you and they realize they don't have a good answer anymore, that's when the pain kicks in. Not because you did something cruel, but because you stopped doing everything kind for someone who took it for granted. It's not about revenge. It's not about playing games. It's about liberation. It's about reclaiming your peace from someone who disrupted it. It's about no longer giving the best of yourself to someone who only gave you the bare minimum. And it's in that moment, you're a moment of walking away, that you realize something incredibly powerful. You were never powerless. You were just invested in the wrong person. You had love, you had consistency, you had care. You just gave it to someone who didn't know what to do with it. But now the tables turn, because while they start to miss what they didn't appreciate, you start to rebuild. You get stronger. You reconnect with yourself. You stop living in limbo and start living in truth. You see the red flags you used to excuse. You stop romanticizing the potential and start confronting the reality. And with every step forward, you create more distance from the version of yourself who tolerated being an afterthought. They thought you'd never leave, but you did. And now they have to sit with what they lost. Here's the beautiful part. You don't need them to validate your worth anymore. You don't need them to apologize for you to heal. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't even give you consistency, because walking away gave you the closure. It gave you clarity. It gave you space to stop shrinking yourself for someone who only loved you in convenient doses. Let them feel the silence. Let them sit in the space they created by not showing up. You're not being cold. You're not being dramatic. You're honoring your energy. You're saying, I deserve more, and meaning it. And maybe they'll come back around, confused, regretful, trying to pull you back in with empty words or sudden affection. But by then it won't work, because you'll see it for what it is, too late. Not because you don't care anymore, boom, but because you finally care about yourself more. So don't fear the silence. Don't fear the distance. Don't fear what happens when you walk away. That's where your power lives. You don't have to be the one who stays and to prove your love. You don't have to be the one who waits for someone to figure out what they have. You get to be the one who chooses peace. Well, who chooses self-respect? Who chooses forward? Because when you stop fighting for someone who never fought for you, that's when you finally win. He thought you'd always be there. Let's just start with that truth. He didn't say it, of course, but everything about the way he acted screamed it. He moved like a man who thought your love was permanent, like you'd always be waiting on the other end of the line, that no matter how long he disappeared, no matter how half-hearted the effort, you'd still be there, ready, waiting, hoping, because that's what you did, right? You stayed through his mixed signals, through the excuses, through the inconsistency. You stuck around hoping that one day he'd wake up and finally realize who you were. You kept giving chances. You kept explaining yourself. You kept showing him your heart. Like maybe this time, he'd actually take care of it. And what did he do? He played it cool, detached, like he had time. Like he could show up whenever he felt like it and you'd still be there smiling and saying it's okay. But here's the part he didn't count on. You were watching. You were listening. You were paying attention to every missed opportunity, every ignored message, every lukewarm gesture. And while you were still physically present, something inside of you started to shift. It was subtle at first, a little voice in the back of your mind saying, "This isn't how I want to feel." You started questioning the version of love you'd accepted, the version that left you anxious, confused, and constantly second-guessing yourself. He didn't notice that shift. Why? Because he was too comfortable. He believed your patience had no limits, that your hope would keep outlasting his avoidance. But here's the thing. Hope doesn't survive forever without action. You can only water a relationship from one side for so long before your well runs dry. And then it happened. Not with fireworks, not with a dramatic exit, but with a quiet, final choice. You stopped waiting. Now, you didn't say anything out loud. Maybe you still replied for a while. Maybe you still smiled, still gave him one more chance. But inside, you were done. And that's the moment the power shifted. Because when someone's used to you waiting, the moment you stop, it creates silence they've never had to sit in before. Suddenly, you're not initiating the conversation. You're not asking where things are going. You're not trying to fix things that were never your fault to begin with. You pulled your energy back. And that's when it hit him, that strange emptiness, that uncomfortable space. That's what happens when you take your presence away from someone who never learned to appreciate it. See, he didn't expect you to change. He thought you'd keep loving him through the emotional chaos he created. He never thought you'd actually leave because you loved him deeply. He knew that, but what he failed to realize was this. When someone like you stops loving out loud, stops waiting, stops hoping, it's not a game. It's not a test. It's a decision. And now he feels it. He might not show it right away. He might still pretend to be unaffected, but deep down, he's scrambling. He's realizing that all the space he used to take for granted is now gone. That the maybe later moments he kept pushing aside have turned into too late. That your silence is saying everything your words used to say, only now with finality. And that stings. Not because he suddenly became the person you needed him to be, but because he finally understands what he lost. But here's the truth you need to remember. Your job was never to wait forever. You weren't put here to hold space for someone who couldn't commit to standing still. You are not a placeholder. You are not someone's emotional security blanket. You were real, you were present, and you were ready for something more than almost. So if he's feeling the pain now, if he's shocked that you're no longer there when he reaches out, that's not on you. That's the consequence of treating someone like an option for too long. Eventually, that option expires. Let him sit with that. Let him feel what it's like to reach out and find nothing. Let him remember all the chances he had to meet you where you were and chose not to. Let him see that love isn't a guarantee just because you used to give it freely. He didn't expect you to stop waiting, but you did. And that was the most powerful thing you've ever done. Because waiting for someone who can't choose you is the slowest form of heartbreak. Talking away from that, that's healing. Not the kind that feels good right away. Not the kind that comes without tears or confusion or doubt, but the kind that creates peace, the kind that builds strength, the kind that teaches you to love yourself more than you ever loved the idea of what could have been. He didn't expect you to stop waiting, but one day you did, and everything changed. Sometimes the greatest impact you can make isn't in what you say, it's in what you no longer do. No more over explaining. No more long messages trying to make someone see what's already obvious. No more standing in front of someone trying to convince them that you matter. You just go. And your absence does something your presence never could. It reveals the gap. It pulls the curtain back. It exposes the emotional laziness they'd been getting away with. See, when you were there, they didn't feel the urgency. You answered the texts. You made the plans. You forgave the cancellations. You kept the connection alive. Not because you were desperate, but because you cared. You believed in what could be. You showed up, but they mistook your effort for permanence. They thought your availability meant you'd always be around. They got used to leaning back while you leaned in. And now? Now they have to sit in the echo of your absence. Because here's the truth. People often don't realize the value of someone until that person stops showing up. When you're gone, they notice the quiet. They notice the ease that's disappeared from their life, the texts that no longer come, the comfort that evaporated, the support they assumed would always be there. They start reaching for what they used to have on demand, and it's not there. That's when the lesson begins. Because while your presence may have been warm, generous, forgiving, your absence is clear. It's not angry, it's not loud, but it's impossible to ignore. And here's what it teaches: that love is not unconditional when it comes to respect. That connection is not a guarantee, it's a responsibility. That you cannot treat someone like a background option and expect them to stay front and center. When you were present, they may have taken it as normal, as something they didn't have to fight for, something that would always bounce back. When you remove yourself from no matter how far they pushed it, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, you show them something they never thought they'd have to confront: the consequences of their choices. Your silence becomes the mirror they can't avoid. It shows them what they cost themselves by not rising to meet you. It forces them to stop romanticizing the dynamic they once controlled and start questioning how they let something good slip through their hands. That's the thing about loss. It has a way of waking people up. When you were there, your love was a cushion. Now that you're gone, it's a wake-up call. But here's what matters more than what they're learning: what you are learning. You're learning that you never had to prove your worth through overextending. You're learning that it's not your job to keep reminding someone that you're valuable. You're learning that your love, your loyalty, your presence, those are gifts, not obligations. And if someone can't match that energy, if they can't show up with consistency, presence, and real effort, then stepping away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because staying in a space where you're undervalued teaches people that they don't need to change. Leaving, that's what resets the equation. That's what reminds people that they don't get unlimited access to your heart just because you once cared. It's easy to be afraid of what your absence will do. Will they miss you? Will they even notice? Will they move on without a second thought? And that fear can keep you hanging on, half in, half out, hoping they'll finally get it while you quietly fall apart waiting. But here's what's powerful. Your absence will be noticed. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the way you expect, but it will leave a space. Because someone like you doesn't go unnoticed forever. Someone who loved deeply, supported consistently, showed up genuinely, that kind of presence leaves an imprint. And when it's gone, it creates discomfort, reflection, regret. That's not cruelty, that's truth. So let your absence do its work. You don't need to chase. You don't need to plead. You don't need to keep handing out chances to someone who's only inspired to do the bare minimum. You step back. You rebuild. You love yourself harder than you loved the illusion of what could have been. And if they finally realize what they lost, if they come back trying to recapture the version of you they once knew, they'll find a different version, a stronger one that no longer needs their validation to feel whole. Your absence teaches a lesson that words never could. You only get access to me when you treat me like I matter. And if you can't do that, you'll lose me. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about myself more. This is the part where the story changes. Not because he changed, not because he came running back, not because he finally saw the light, but because you did. You stopped sitting around wondering if you were enough for someone who couldn't even be clear about what they wanted. You stopped auditioning for a role you were overqualified for. You stepped out of the waiting room of someone else's indecision and walked straight into your power. And now you decide who gets access to you. That's not just about blocking someone's number or ignoring their messages. That's not revenge. That's boundaries, real, healthy ones, the kind that say, I am not an option. I'm not your convenience. And I am done making room in my life for people who don't value the space they're given. Because let's be honest, there was a time when you would have jumped the second he texted. You would have dropped your plans to make time. You would have read too far into a heart emoji or a 2 a.m. I miss you. But now it's different. You've been through the storm. You've felt the ache of being someone's second choice. You've lived in the space between almost and not quite. And that version of you, the one who accepted less, who hoped he'd change, who kept compromising your standards just to keep the connection alive, she's gone. You've outgrown her. You see, what happens when you finally heal is this. You start being selective, not bitter, not jaded, just clear. Clear on your value, clear on your standards, clear on the fact that your time, your heart, your energy, they're investments, not giveaways. And with that clarity comes a new kind of power, a calm, grounded power that says, I know what I bring to the table and I won't beg anyone to sit with me. So when someone from your past suddenly checks in with that lazy, hey, stranger text, you don't get butterflies, you get bored. Because you've done the work. You've healed the part of you that used to mistake breadcrumbs for a meal. You've realized that attention isn't affection and presence isn't commitment. You want consistency. You want respect. You want someone who doesn't just say the right words, but shows up with the right actions. And if someone can't offer that, they don't get access. Not because you're punishing them, but because access to you is a privilege, not a right. Let's stop pretending that just because someone wants us, that means they deserve us. There are people who will want your warmth, but not your growth, who will want your body, but not your boundaries, who will want your loyalty, but not the responsibility that comes with it. Wanting you isn't enough anymore. Effort is the new bare minimum. If someone wants access to you, they need to earn it. With honesty, with consistency, with intentionality. They need to show up in ways that match the love you're willing to give. And the moment you hold that standard, the whole game changes. Because you're no longer playing small. You're no longer shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're choosing. And what you're choosing now is you, your peace, your standards, your joy, your growth, your future. That doesn't mean you won't love again. It doesn't mean you won't open up. It just means that next time you'll be wiser with your energy. You'll pay more attention to the red flags you used to explain away. You'll trust your gut when it tells you this doesn't feel right. And you'll walk away faster when someone shows you they can't meet you at your level. Because you've seen what happens when you give the wrong person too much access. They drain you. They confuse you. They keep you stuck in cycles of false hope and broken promises. Not anymore. Now you are the gatekeeper of your own heart. You get to decide who steps into your world and who stays outside of it. And when someone comes along who's real, is intentional, honest, and emotionally available, you'll recognize it. Not because they'll be perfect, but because their energy won't exhaust you. It'll feel safe, effortless, aligned. Until then, don't be afraid of being alone. Be afraid of settling. Be afraid of giving someone access to your life just because they're familiar. Because every time you say no to what you don't want, you make space for what you do. This is your new reality. You are no longer someone who waits for love. You are someone who chooses it, who protects it, who shares it with those who are ready and worthy. You don't need to chase. You don't need to prove. You just need to own your worth and never hand it over to someone who doesn't know what to do with it. Your love is rare. Your presence is a privilege. And from now on, only the ones who show up fully, honestly, and consistently get the key to you.